Hello, I'm Stephen Missick, and welcome to this episode of Voice of the Word. And in this program, I want to talk about what the Assyrian people need to do to survive. My friend Liz Huber, she's sponsoring a project called the Assyrian ID, and she posted a graphic about this where we see an Assyrian immigrant family. The first generation was actually born in the Middle East, in the Assyrian homeland of Bet Narain. Then you have the second generation where they speak Aramaic, Assyrian Aramaic, growing up in the home. By the third generation, it's like the Assyrian identity is beginning to fade away. And then by the fourth generation, it's lost. These people aren't really Assyrian at all. So immigration actually for Assyrian people, for a lot of nations, when you have an entire country and millions of people who belong to a certain nationality or ethnicity, there's nothing really lost, right? Because they have a country, But if you're an ethnic minority that doesn't have any national sovereignty, and there's all these forces, it could lead to an extinction of this identity. It's a type of genocide. It's auto-genocide when you immigrate to the West and you face rapid assimilation and loss of cultural identity forever. Immigration, which of course provides great opportunities to create wealth and to live a good life in these Western countries, could be the death knell for Assyrian national identity. That's just a fact. But on the other hand, we're going to address this. If the Middle East is depopulated of its Assyrian population, and all you have is immigrant communities, then eventually it's going to be national extinction of the Assyrian people. That's just what's going to happen. But an immigration community or an immigrant community could be an asset potentially to the survival of the nation if steps are taken to preserve the Assyrian culture and national identity. That's what I'm going to discuss in this program.
Jesus was an Aramaic-speaking Jew of the Middle East, and the Assyrians are Aramaic-speaking Christians in the Middle East who have endured persecution for over 1,000 years. Join Voice of the Word Aramaic Bible teacher, artist, and author Stephen Missick as he examines the Bible through the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times in which it was first revealed. Research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the Church to its Semitic roots. And now, Voice of the Word.
So, this is a very complex issue of what the Assyrian people need to do to survive, because there's the potential of national extinction that the Assyrian people are facing when the numbers in their indigenous homeland are dwindling, and you have massive immigration and then quick assimilation, and like I said, loss of cultural identity. So what do the Assyrian people need to do to survive? What the Assyrian people need to do to survive. One of the things the Assyrians need to do is to have larger families. I was traveling outside of Hasaki, visiting these Assyrian communities, which used to be there. Now they're mostly depopulated. And you see the Kurds, and the Kurds just laying around and not really doing much, but, having a wife and having as many children as possible. It's like, wow, look what these Kurds are doing. They're just, taking all over the place, because they don't do a lot. But one of the things they do is they have a bunch of kids. And that means if you have children, you have a future. Children represent national survival. And the Kurds might not understand a lot of things, but they understand that. So if you want to perpetuate our ethnicity, our nationality, in the future, if you want to exist as a nation and have a future, you need to have children. If you don't have kids, you're going to die out. Recently, there was this church bombing in Damascus, and Patriarch Ezekiel is like, we don't have as big as families as the Muslim groups do, so this is really devastating to us. But nothing is stopping you from having children. Actually, demographics on Muslim groups, it's not as bad as it is for the Christian ethnicities and groups or Europeans, but they have demographic decline too if you look into it. And it's very difficult to change that trend when people don't value marriage and the family life, and they delay marriage or don't get married, don't have kids. It's hard to reverse that trend, but it's a decision. And I was reading this book, The Martyr Church. I'm not saying it's a perfect book, by David Wilhurst. In this book, he's mentioning that the Zoroastrian Persians carried out, just slaughtered tens or hundreds of thousands of Assyrian Christians. And after this persecution ended, the patriarch just told the Assyrian community back then, it's like, we're just going to have to rebuild our numbers by marrying and having children to restore our numbers to what because it was so devastating with all the massacres. So they made a decision, and the church encouraged people to get married and have kids, and they did. And it took a little bit of time, but the numbers of Assyrians were restored. So will men get married and have families? It's everybody's individual decision, but we need to encourage them to do this. Actually, Elon Musk, this is not just an Assyrian issue. This is a global human issue where we have that problem of declining population. The left has been talking about overpopulation, but it seems like actually the opposite is true. And there's a lot of studies that prove it. So people do need to marry and have families, perpetuate the species and our cultures and civilization, including the Assyrian culture. So Assyrian church leaders should say, instead of just bemoaning it, just say, hey, look, you want to serve the kingdom of God, you want to serve the Assyrian nation, then let's grow our nation, let's grow our church by having kids and raising them to perpetuate in the future our culture and our civilization and our nationality, our ethnicity. That's what needs to be done. And if you don't do it, you will die off. So leaders need to encourage, and you need to have 3 or 4 kids at least, if not more. That's just a step that needs to be taken to preserve the Assyrian nation. And the women, you need to speak Aramaic at home and teach your kids Aramaic. Just think about, I remember my father was working years ago and he had encounters with the gypsy people. And over 1,000 years ago, the gypsies migrated from India into the Middle East and from there to Europe. And they still speak their languages among themselves. So it can be done. It can be done. But we just have to take the initiative to do it. So that's an important thing is having children. The second issue is we have to maintain a population of Assyrians in the ancestral homeland of Mesopotamia. We need to maintain a Christian population in Syria, Iraq, and Iran. That's just an important part. We have to have communities over there in the ancestral homeland preserving the culture where it originated in the Middle East. And of course, there's a lot of pressures. I want to talk about this in a future episode, what's going on. Of course, you have the rise of militant Islam, and they don't want... I was reading a book, I found it very disturbing. The author was describing massacres and genocide as the process of full conversion. That's what the Islamists are after, to wipe out any non-Muslim ethnicities and minorities. All the religious minorities, from their point of view, have got to go. And they're succeeding in this terrible endeavor, at least for now. All right, let's continue. I was talking to Romina Jonas, a friend of mine, and she's done a lot of work in Armenia. And, there are challenges which I think it needs to be done. We need to support and maintain these communities in the Middle East. But there's a lot of challenges where you have extremist forces in that country trying to wipe them out. And it's difficult to be a Christian. We face persecution and discrimination in Muslim-majority nations. But Armenia is a Christian-majority nation, and we have like a village of about 3,000 people in Armenia. And I think that Armenia it borders Iran and Turkey, that area. So it's and a lot of Assyrians actually came from eastern Turkey, and until the genocide of 1915 and thereabouts, and the Hakkari Mountains. That's where a lot of Syrians came from. They were displaced. So this area, Armenia, is very close to the ancestral homeland, and so you don't face Islamic domination, coercion, discrimination, persecution. So this is a Christian country, and why don't we grow that community? We need to have an Assyrian village in Armenia to grow and maintain that village there, where they're close to the ancestral homeland, and they don't face the threat from Islamist forces. So Romania Jonas has done that. I think there's around 3,000, but we should probably try to grow and maintain that community. It's like you look at Iraq and Iran. There's more challenges there because those are Muslim countries, but I think we should be able to maintain this presence near the homeland in Armenia. We also have something I think is very important is Jishru. That's where we have the Jewish people do that, where they take Jews to go visit Israel and to maintain an identity with the Jewish community in the Middle East in their own independent nation. So an Assyrian is looking at that and says, well, why don't we as Assyrians in the same way go back and visit our ancestral homeland and interact with the communities there in the Middle East? So they have these little tour groups and expeditions, if you will, visiting pilgrimages of sorts, visiting the homeland. And there's like if you go to Marmatai or Hamoud Rassam, or there's things to do and see over that Rabban Bayo shrine. There's places you could visit over there that'd be good to enrich your understanding of your own culture as an Assyrian, and to interact and help maintain those communities there. So that's a good idea. But I think that they should also do Jeshru for non-Assyrians. Let's bring evangelical other church groups to, there should be Jeshru type 1 for Assyrians, type 2 for non-Assyrians, to engage the greater Christian community, to interact with them, to encourage them, their support for the Assyrian people and the Assyrian Christian community and Christians in the Middle East in general. So the next point I want to look at is Assyrian celebrities. People don't know who the Assyrians are. What's an Assyrian? They're confused by that. And now we have people who have achieved a type of celebrity status, so people are being introduced to the Assyrian identity and culture. People like Sam Shamoun, he's the Assyrian Encyclopedia. And then we have Patrick Bet-David. He's got the Assyrian flag behind him as he interviews people. And then we got Marmari Emmanuel. And of course, there's a lot of division and controversy about Marmari Emmanuel, but the fact of the matter is he's an international televangelist. Who would have thought? You got Billy Graham and Jimmy Swaggart and, Joel Osteen, all these evangelical Christians as televangelist. An Assyrian Christian from Baghdad as an internationally recognized preacher and evangelist, televangelist. That's quite an achievement for an Assyrian. So that's good for the community, even though certain people might, especially in these churches, might not have a high opinion of Marmari. Plus, you got to respect him forcefully speaking on moral issues and speaking the truth about Islam. And, he almost died for his bold stand for Christ. I'm not saying the man's perfect. None of us are, but you got to respect what he's been able to accomplish. And we need more of that. We need more, how do you achieve celebrity status like that? Well, these people have, and I think that's good for the Assyrian community. Where you have Marmari Emmanuel, and you see the Aramaic on his altar, and a lot of people, have no idea who the Assyrian people are, what Aramaic is. So this is creating a lot of awareness that the Assyrian people need. We need our celebrities, and I just hope some of these people act right, because Sam Shamoun can be. Sometimes, like I said, when you're talking to radical Muslims, you should be belligerent against them. But when you're talking to a brother and sister in Christ or a fellow Assyrian, I don't know. Sometimes you have to control your impulses and be well-mannered. So, but still, you got to respect what Sam Shamoun has been able to do, and he's very effective. The next thing we need to do is support scholarship of the Assyrian Christian heritage. Assyrians should know their own culture, like, taking the gospel to China, the martyrs throughout history, great Assyrian theologians and scholars of the past, a general history of the Assyrian Church of the East, and we need to encourage scholarship on this. Of course, also the ancient Assyrian past, but the Assyrian identity as it exists now, this cultural identity was founded by King Abgar, by St. Thaddeus and Mari. That's who the Assyrian people. I'm not denigrating the past at all. It's a great, glorious past, the ancient Assyrian Empire. But this is now a Syriac Christian civilization. And it's very interesting history, and it needs to be studied and celebrated. So the next point is my work. Support my work with my show. I guess you watch different episodes, you can see what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do. And we need to engage. I think the Assyrians need to engage with American evangelicals and create kind of, I'll have to talk about this later, creating a new paradigm for evangelicals for relating to the Middle East. Because American evangelicals tend to relate to the Middle East only through support for Israel, as it has been. That's starting to change. And I think that we should seek moderation and peace and not take extreme positions on Israel. What can we do to achieve peace? And there are certain things that that Israel does that I don't agree with or like, and I think that if we're friendly at least towards Israel, perhaps we can put diplomatic pressure on that nation to do what's right, or at least what's in the interest of Christians and the Christian population of Israel. I mean, Israel probably depends the tourism industry in Israel is it's a big important thing for them, probably a big revenue generator. So if they're working against Christian interest or discriminating against Christians in any way, we should say, if you want us to come over there as pilgrims, and it's a great experience. I've done pilgrimages to Israel. I've done archaeological work there. I loved it. But it's a complicated issue I want to talk about later. But we need to, why, I don't understand, this kind of bewilders me. It's like evangelical Christians in America are very passionate about Israel, but it's hard to get them interested in any way about the Coptic Christians or the Assyrian Christians. That needs to change. It can change, and maybe it is changing. But my work is about the language of Jesus, right? That's how I became interested. Well, two things that interest me about the Assyrian people. Number one is they still speak Aramaic language of Jesus. Number two is the history of the church. And this is also a missionary church that has churches in China, had churches in China, India, Mongolia. I thought that was very fascinating. Here's this, for a lot of people, an unknown branch of non-Western, non-European, Middle Eastern, Semitic, Aramaic Christianity. I thought that was very fascinating. So I started studying about the Assyrian Church of the East. But a pioneer in this field was the Assyrian American George Lambza. And I don't agree with all of George Lambza's theology. I don't think he was properly orthodox. But he's an innovator, and let's study the Bible through and understand Jesus through his Middle Eastern culture and through the Aramaic language. And so he did his translation of the Bible. He also did his biblical commentaries, and he would also bring vignettes about, he goes, the culture I grew up in, George Lambza was saying, wasn't really too different from the culture Jesus grew up in. I grew up as an Aramaic speaker in the Middle East. In a lot of ways, daily life with shepherds and, the simple life in rural villages hasn't really changed all that much. I mean, it's changed now, but when George Lambza was growing up, he could relate to the Bible stories because life hadn't changed all that much since Bible times to his time. But I'm a trained theologian, evangelical Christian, and orthodoxy and being faithful to teaching the apostles, the scriptures, to traditional Christian orthodoxy is important to me. So I don't like people with sensational ideas. We need to maintain what the Bible says, what the apostles taught. I don't like innovations or new interpretations. We have to maintain tradition. I don't like innovations and brand new and sensational interpretations. And some there's a trend of that, and unfortunately, Lamsa's work has been taken over by New Agers and practitioners of the occult. But I think, even though I don't agree with all of his conclusions, I think Lamsa's initial approach was good and correct. It just he didn't stay in a proper footing, in my opinion. But I'm a Bible scholar. I could use the Aramaic resources and perhaps do better than George Lamsa did. But I respect his work, but I don't agree with all of his teachings and conclusions. And he's a good writer, and a lot of his commentaries are easy to engage with. So, with my voice of the word and Aramaic Bible teaching, I think the Assyrian community should support that. And that's a way to maintain the language to use Aramaic in worship. Another thing I want to talk about, let's not miss opportunities. So several years ago, there's a lot of, you have Chinese, China's becoming an emerging global power. And, in the military, we're very concerned because China in reality, even though they're a trade partner, China is a hostile foreign power. It's a communist nation, it's a totalitarian nation, and they want to have global dominance. So China wants to become a greater power, which is dangerous to the world because they're a communist country. And it's an emerging power becoming stronger, and America has to, and to a degree is beginning to engage to confront the threat of China. China's becoming a national security threat against the United States. It just is. But if you don't want to, just put that aside, the relationship between China and the United States. China is an emerging global power. And the Chinese, they can be, they're very nationalistic, perhaps approaching racist sometimes, xenophobic. But there's many positive traits that China has. There's negative traits as well throughout history. But what's happening in China now, what was happening is you have these Chinese Christian communities, and they're thinking it's like, we're part of the Assyrian Church of the East, the Syriac Church. That's our past. From 636, certain Chinese Christians embraced Christianity. We have the ancient texts showing this. And so these Chinese Christians are thinking, why should we belong to the American Southern Baptist Convention or even the Roman Catholic Church? We've already had our form of Christianity for 1,400 years. So these Chinese Christians are thinking, well, why don't we just return to our ancestral Chinese church that we've belonged to since Christianity arrived? And so these American or European denominations, let's reconnect to the original Chinese church, the Assyrian Church of the East. And there were Chinese Christians approaching the Assyrian Church of the East, and it seems like they've been rebuffed. Why would you do that? Well, what if 1 million Chinese Christians joined the Church of the East? They could dwarf the Assyrians. So, there's tens of thousands of Indians. Some of the Indian Christians of St. Thomas may have Assyrian, because there's evidence that Assyrians immigrated to that area in India. Of course, Thomas went there and converted people, but there were interactions between Persia and Mesopotamia and India, and there were people who came as settlers that settled, who were Assyrians. This is known that the number of the disciples of St. Thomas was grown through people from the Middle East immigrating to India in the Middle Ages and earlier, and settling there, and adding to the numbers of the indigenous Christians with immigration from the Middle East. So, but the fact of the matter is, talking about assimilation, that's happened over there. I mean, these people are aware that some of their ancestors are from Syria, but they're totally assimilated into Indian culture. I mean, they use Aramaic in services, but these aren't. You can only loosely say that these Indian Christians in Trishur in Kerala they're part of the Assyrian Church, but they're not truly Assyrian themselves, even though they might have some Assyrian ancestry. So, are Assyrians all upset that there's tens of thousands of Indian people who are part of the Assyrian Church of the East? So if we have Chinese people who are part of the Assyrian Church of the East, They were already part of the Church of the East. They're just coming back. What's the issue? And it could be, it's like, oh, we want this to be our church, just a church just for Assyrians. We don't want these people diluting our numbers. Well, it could benefit the Assyrian church greatly. As the Chinese economy develops and these people, they could save the Assyrian church. But the issue is, I believe that the Assyrian church submits to Rome. They will be merged into the Chaldean Catholic Church. And that will be, if that happens, the Assyrian church becomes part of the Chaldean Catholic Church. That could be a fatal blow to Assyrian national identity. And if the Assyrian Church of the East becomes Roman Catholic, they will be merged with the Chaldean Catholic Church. Inevitably, eventually, maybe not at first, but they will. It's already happened. It's already happened where you had this bishop broke off from the Assyrian Church, joined the Chaldean Church, and where is he now? We lost 1,000 families. It's going to be extinction. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but how could it not? Maybe the Catholic Church doesn't want Chinese Christians to join the Assyrian Church of the East because they have plans for the Assyrian Church of the East. And they're telling the bishops what to do. But there's all this. It's a great opportunity. I think maybe the old calendars will take them. Why would you not grow the? It's just the Mongolians and Chinese probably outnumbered the Assyrians, during the heyday of the Assyrian Church of the East. It didn't do any harm to the church. I mean, it's good for the church, isn't it? Why would you have any hesitancy when you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or 1 million perhaps Chinese Christians that want to join the Assyrian Church? They're coming back home. I've talked to some bishops. I shouldn't say too much about it. Keep things in confidence, but I don't understand it. Like I said, if one branch of the church doesn't, then perhaps these Chinese. I think the Chinese Christians were really hurt and disappointed that they're ready to join the Assyrian Church of the East, and then they're rebuffed. But like I said, there's probably the two concerns could be, number one, Assyrians afraid that we don't want a Chinese majority church. It's like, well, what if it was that way 1,000 years ago? Did it matter? Did it hurt the Assyrian church? It's just going back the way it was. Actually, isn't that good for the church? That could be a concern. We don't want to become a minority in our own Assyrian church. But I think the other thing is people in the background, the Catholics, is like, it doesn't help Catholicism to have. It's like, okay, what if we have a Syriac, if you have a Chinese, Aramaic Chinese church, that's when the Catholic missionaries arrived in China, they took over the Assyrian churches. And, we're going to force you to become Roman Catholics now. And so if the Chinese become Syriac Christians again, that would undo all the work they spent. They spent hundreds of years trying to assimilate the Chinese church into Western European practices, and they don't want to go back to have all their work undone. We don't want you to do it the Aramaic way. We don't want you to do it the way the apostles did. We want you to do it the way Western European Catholics do it. So that probably doesn't serve the interest of the Catholic Church to have Chinese people. But if you want to survive as a nation, have the Assyrian Church survive, I wouldn't hesitate. And I remember I was talking to, it's probably through George Lambsa's work, but I knew Kasia Klutz. There's also Kasia Burney, I think he's in Washington State. And these were probably they probably learned about this Church of the East through George Lambsa's writing. So you had an influx back then of white Americans becoming members of the Assyrian Church of the East. There's been no effort since Mar Shamoun was assassinated. I don't think there's been any effort to reach out to it's all Catholic, right? Before that, they tried to forge relationships with the British. Unfortunately, the British eventually turned against the Assyrians because of greed for oil and other interests. And I guess you had an approach with evangelicals to a limited extent, probably through Lambsa's work mostly, but the church seemed to, under Mar Shamoun, embrace that, at least to a certain extent. But Marawa has spoken to Baptist groups in the past. I don't think he's going to do it now. Like I said, I think there's forces putting pressure on the Assyrian church of the East to move in a certain direction. But I'm concerned about the direction they're trying to move it into. Is what I'm trying to avoid in these points, right? How to escape national extinction. And there are some forces that want to ensure national extinction for the Assyrian people. So you need to be aware of that, right? If Assyrians want to survive as a nation, you be aware of senator forces who might be working on good people. I love Marawa, and I'm not going to say anything negative about him at all. I consider him a friend and pray for him. He's the bishop of Patriarch Catholicos, the Assyrian Church of the East. He needs our prayers, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of pressures, regardless if there are sinister pressures or not. There's a lot of pressures, because he's the de facto leader of the Assyrian people, and just pray for him. So whatever we do, it should be about love and kindness and compassion. So I think we should embrace Chinese people that want to join. Why wouldn't you? It seems I don't understand it. I mean, I can understand it, like I said, if it's about a Catholic takeover of the Assyrian Church of the East. I can understand their motivations, but it's like, why wouldn't the church, especially we're in dire straits, and the Chinese are throwing a lifeline, which could lead to the preservation of the Assyrian national identity of the Assyrian Church. And it's like the old Jerry Clower story, of the dam broke, and the squad car goes up to the porch, and the farmer's sitting on his porch, and the car says, hey, the cop says, get in my car right now, sheriff, get the sheriff's truck, squad car right now. The dam broke, water's coming. And he's sitting on the porch and said, God's going to take care of me. Take your squad car and move on. I'm not afraid. God's going to take care of me. And then the water's rising. He's up in on the roof of the porch, and he's sitting up there, and then a boat comes by, and hey, get in the boat. The water's it's not finished. It's going to get even higher. Jump in the boat. No, just take your boat and go. God's going to take care of me. And then later, the farmer's on the roof, standing on the chimney, and the water's getting higher and higher. And the helicopter comes down, flying over, and it speaks to the, sound amplifier. Farmer Jones, we're throwing a rope ladder out. Grab the rope ladder. The water's even going to get higher. Oh, take your helicopter and fly away. God's going to take care of me. And then Farmer Jones drowns. And he goes before the pearly gates and stands before God himself. And Farmer Jones says, oh, Lord, I had faith in you. I believe that you're going to take care of me. And I drown. And the Lord says, Farmer Jones, you idiot, I sent you a squad car, a motorboat, and a helicopter. So, I mean, if God sends something to, save the Assyrians, why would you refuse it? I don't understand it. But that's the choices that certain people are making. Like I said, there's perhaps diabolical forces out there working against it. And lastly, I want to talk about Sam Shamoun. And we got Raymond Ibrahim. He's Coptic Christian, but I was really encouraged when we had, I was with Marawa recently, and the Syrian Orthodox priest helped us conduct the Holy Qurbana. And, I disagree with their Christology. But, we all believe the Nicene Creed. If you believe the Nicene, from my opinion, if you believe that's what they wrote it for, to define orthodoxy. So the Assyrian Church of the East, the Syrian Orthodox Church, they believe in the Nicene Creed. These things are just splitting hairs. They're petty differences. And why should we fight among ourselves when they both believe Jesus is the Son of God and that he's fully God and fully man? And so we believe that Jesus is Son of God, fully man, the divine Trinity. Why should we? That's enough, isn't it? But we have to hate each other and fight over, proper terminology. It's just foolish. But it was good to see, because when I was at Syria at Marat Sinai, there's just a lot of hatred towards the Assyrians. These people probably never met Assyrians, but it was inculcated in them to hate the Assyrian Church of the East, and they did. And I was talking, it's like you don't understand the Assyrian Church. They're not Arians, they're Trinitarians. But anyway, it's good to see Christians coming. So the Coptic Christians, the Assyrian Christians, there's all this division. A lot of it's coming from, almost all of it's coming from Coptic church leadership. But we have common interests, actually, and we should work together. Raymond Ibrahim is a Coptic Christian, and he's written a lot of good books, Crucified Again, Al-Qaeda Reader, and I'm going to talk about some of his statements as well. But what Raymond Ibrahim is doing, that's very important, is exposing Islam, like Sam Shamoun does. We have to do that. We have to do that. We have to, it's not just about Assyrians or Coptic people, this is a threat to the entire world. For the sake of humanity, for the sake of mankind, we have to expose Islam for what it is, what it teaches, what it's done, how they've massacred. I was looking at this diagram where someone's like, how many people have Muslims killed in jihad or through persecution? And I think the numbers they arrived at were like 250 million people over the past 1,400 years. That's a large. I mean, that'd be 2/3 or more of the population of the United States. The number of people killed in jihad is staggering. Look at Muslim civilizations. Every civilization, country, nation is a failed state because this ideology is destructive. It's been destructive. The Assyrian people have suffered under it. The Coptic people have suffered under it, and we don't want to see all mankind suffer under it. So what Raymond Ibrahim is doing, he's talking about these issues, but he's also looking at history, looking at the history of jihad, and looking at the people who opposed it. And he wrote a book called Sword and Scimitar and others, talking about military history, how that's one of the ways you stop jihad, is in combat, defeating these people on the battlefield. There's other ways to defeat them. Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. We need to speak out and expose these people for what they did. I was reading some things by Indians. It's like millions upon millions of Indians, because Indians as Hindus are not people. They cannot. They're idolaters. They cannot be people of the book. So they're given just free range just to kill all of them. And, as many as they can. And they've killed many Hindus. But the numbers are so large they weren't able to destroy them the way they just destroyed a lot of Christian communities, the way they destroyed the Manichaeans and others. So since India has a high population, but many people died, and some of these it's like these Indian scholars looking at it, and it's like, sometimes we have to solve these issues on the battlefield, but why we can avoid violence, because this ideology is absurd, it's ridiculous, it's offensive to the intellect, and the behavior these people engaged in is repulsive, shocking, disgusting, and repulsive. The things that this ideology has done, Islamist ideology. And this is also, I think, an issue for national survival, where if the Syrian people want to survive, they have to expose, like Sam Shamoun is doing, expose the fallacy of Islam, expose the crimes of Islam against the indigenous populations and what the suffering they inflicted upon what used to be a majority Christian population that's been destroyed, ethnic cleansing, genocide. We have to expose it. So this is what we need to do to ensure national survival. Let me go through it again. Number one, look at the Assyrian ID illustrating the problem. Immigration means rap for Assyrians. Like I said, you take a country like Mexico. Mexico's not going anywhere. So if Mexican Americans assimilate, and within a generation or two they're 100% American, don't even think of themselves as having any attachment to Hispanic culture whatsoever, that doesn't really matter because Mexico's not going away. Assyria could be going away. So the Assyrians are affected negatively by immigration in a way which other nationalities are not, right? So if you have an entire country with a large population, an immigrant community assimilating into a different country's society and culture doesn't affect the continued existence from where these people came from, but it does with the Assyrians. And we have to be aware of that. Immigration means assimilation, which means loss of cultural identity unless steps are taken to preserve it. Number one, what Liz Huber is saying. Number two, Assyrians have to have big families. You just got to do it. If you want to survive as a nation, you have to have, and Assyrians have done it before successfully, we have to do it again. We have to maintain a presence in the homeland, even if it's small villages here and there. we need to keep as much as we can of what we have now. We need to stop the bleeding and preserve the communities that are there, if possible. We do what we can to make sure we have a continued community of Christians in Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And with hostage-taking these Assyrian villages, once we have peace in Syria, Assyrians need to go take their villages back. Of course, we have to run off the Kurds, maybe. Fight them in court. So, also, Armenia is important because Armenia is close to our ancestral homeland. Grow the community there. Jeshurun. We need new Jeshurun. Jeshurun for Assyrians to go and reconnect to their ancestral culture and homeland. But we also need Jeshurun to bring, that'd be great, bring pastors over there. Israel does it. Why do you think Israel does that? Oh, pastors, we'll give you a free, building relationships because it helps their national interests. So, I mean, try it. You make money to do it. Let's bring church leaders and Christians to see the Aramaic Assyrian Christian culture in its homeland. Jeshurun for non-Assyrians. All right. Assyrian celebrities, point 6. People like Patrick David. He's got this Assyrian flag right there showing the whole world that he's a proud Assyrian. And then we need to encourage and support greater scholarship and awareness created of the Assyrian cultural identity, the Christian culture of Assyrians. 8, the studying the Bible and church history through an Aramaic perspective. That's important, like George Lamza did. Even though he made some errors, we can build on his work and correct his errors. Like I said, it's very innovative what he did in a good way, right? Because, the concept, the execution is not satisfactory to me because I'm a champion of orthodoxy, but I appreciate his efforts. If Chinese people want to join the Assyrian church, I just understand why you should accept them. The Assyrians need them, for crying out loud. It's just the Assyrian people are dying. I don't understand. Like I said, if you're coming from the Catholic perspective and they want to absorb the Assyrian church, and that would be an impediment. That create difficulties in China because the Chinese Catholic Church, they don't want Assyrian Christians in China for obvious reasons. Lastly, Raymond Ibrahim, he's a Coptic Christian, but he's doing important work in exposing Islam and also exposing the history of persecution, like this book. And we need to do a book like this. Actually, my doctoral thesis is going to be touching on some of this. This is the Coptic perspective, A Sword Over the Nile, about what the Muslims have done to the Coptic Christian population, how they've reduced it from 100% to what it is now, 15 to 10%. But things can change. Just think about Muhammad. What was he? What was Muhammad? Some savage, illiterate, I mean, the Quran is incoherent, disjointed in his thinking. Very unimpressive. Muhammad is an unimpressive person. The Quran's an insult to anybody's intellect. I mean, people grew up in that, they can't help it. That's all they know. But it's offensive. The whole Quran's offensive. Chapter, the sword chapters, it has to be condemned. So, why even promote this system of oppression and death and destruction of civilization? I don't understand. And if this illiterate savage could create so much destruction, just one person, God's not with Muhammad. It's a disaster what happened. Perhaps Satan was with him. But if he could have done so much damage, just one person creating this absurd, ridiculous cult, what can we do if we try with the truth, right? If we rely on the power of God, if God is for us, who can be against us? And with God, all things are impossible. We can save the Assyrian nation. And perhaps, it's amazing the Assyrians have survived. A lot of Christian groups like North Africa was the foundation of early Christianity. There's no Christians there anymore outside of Egypt. Not much to be spoken for. Sudan, another important ancient Christian community, gone. But the Assyrians miraculously have survived. Perhaps this is God's providence, and perhaps God is about to move, and we need to move with him. So, back to the Jerry Clower, the Mouth of the South story. If God sends you a squad car, if he sends you a motorboat and a helicopter, take the resources God sends you and use them. Don't just sit around there complaining or relying on, some kind of a miracle that's not going to come. we need to use the resources God has given us, and mustard seed faith, right? A little bit, we can make a lot. A little is much if God's with us. And if we attempt great things for God, we can expect great things from God. So I hope the Assyrian community listens to this video and takes it to heart.
Research, rescue, and restore. Help Voice of the Word and Aramaic Christian Ministries mission research the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times of the Bible. Rescue persecuted Assyrian Christians in the Middle East and restore Christianity to its original Semitic roots. For Stephen Missick's books, online giving, and other resources from Aramaic Christian Ministries, visit www.stephenmissick.com. Join us next time on Voice of the Word as we research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the church to its Semitic roots.